This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. A fire at a wedding party in northern Iraq killed more than 100 people and injured at least 150. Flares are said to have ignited a ceiling decoration. Reuters correspondent Olivia Chan reports.
Survivors said hundreds of people were at the wedding celebration after an earlier church service. The fire began about an hour into the event when flares ignited a ceiling decoration as the bride and groom danced. The Interior Ministry said it had issued 4 arrest warrants for the owners of the wedding hall, state media reported. And President Abdul Latif Rashid has called for an investigation. State media added that preliminary information indicated that the building was made of highly flammable construction materials, which contributed to its rapid collapse.
Reuters correspondent Olivia Chan. Refugees are arriving in Armenia after spending 10 months under an Azerbaijani blockade that led to critical shortages in Karabakh. Armenia's government said on Wednesday that more than 50,000 Karabakh refugees so far had crossed the border out of a total of estimated Karabakh Armenian population of 120,000. The sudden influx has strained resources in Goris, the border town where Armenian authorities have booked out hotels for refugees with nowhere to go. Iran claims it successfully launched an imaging satellite into space. State-run IRN news agency, quoting the country's communication minister, as saying the satellite had been put into orbit 450 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The U.S. has alleged that Iran's satellite launches defy a UN Security Council resolution. This is VOA News. Russia accuses Ukraine's Western allies of helping attack its Black Sea Fleet headquarters the day after video appeared to show Russia's Black Sea Fleet commander, Admiral Viktor Sokolov, was still alive despite Ukraine's claims he was among 34 officers killed in a Friday strike. AP correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports.
The Kremlin had not commented on Tuesday on Sokolov's status, but had posted video showing him among other senior officers attending a video conference with Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. Sokolov did not speak in the clip. When asked about Sokolov on Wednesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov noted that he'd taken part in Tuesday's video call with Shoigu, but had refrained from further comment. Ukraine's Special Operation Forces had posted a statement on Tuesday saying its sources claimed Sokolov was among the dead, many of whom have not yet been identified. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Ukraine on Wednesday urged judges at the United Nations highest court to dismiss Russia's objections and hear in full Kyiv's claim Moscow abused international law by saying the 2022 invasion was done to stop an alleged genocide. Last week, Russia urged the ICJ, also known as the World Court, to throw out the case, saying Kyiv's legal arguments were flawed. Kyiv argues Russia is abusing international law by saying the invasion was justified to stop an alleged genocide in eastern Ukraine. The World Health Organization is calling on schools to protect children from the toxic impact of tobacco use by creating nicotine and tobacco-free zones on their campuses. Lisa Schlein reports for VOA from Geneva.
The WHO guide highlights 4 ways to promote a nicotine and tobacco-free environment for young people. They include banning nicotine and tobacco products on school campuses, prohibiting the sale of e-cigarettes and other tobacco products near schools, and banning the advertisement and promotion of tobacco products near schools. The guide also calls on schools to refuse sponsorships or engagement with tobacco and nicotine industries. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump will be in the battleground state of Michigan, working to win over blue-collar voters in the midst of an auto workers' strike. Trump's trip on Wednesday comes as his Republican challengers gather on stage in California for their second primary debate. Trump's visit also comes a day after President Joe Biden became the first sitting U.S. president in history to walk a picket line as he joined workers in Michigan. I'm Joe Ramsey.
This is VOA News. I'm Alexis Strope. House Republicans have launched their first formal impeachment inquiry hearing against President Biden. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports.
James Comer and other GOP committee chairs say there is a clear link between the president and his son Hunter's overseas businesses.
A mountain of evidence revealing how Joe Biden abused his public office for his family's financial gain.
Democrat Jamie Raskin says there is no evidence the president did anything wrong.
No gun, no smoke.
And key witnesses like George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley, who was called by the GOP, say so far,
I do not believe that the current evidence would support articles of impeachment.
The hearing unfolded with the Democrats displaying a screen counting down the hours and minutes until a government shutdown.
People are going to be hurt when this time runs out.
With Maryland's Kweisi Mfume blasting Republicans for wasting the time on a political stunt.
Why in the hell are we playing this game?
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
The European Union's top migration official, Eva Johansson, said the bloc was set to agree on how to handle irregular migration soon after ministers' talks yielded no final deal on Thursday, with Berlin and Rome worried over rising arrivals ahead of key elections. The ministers were searching for agreement on a long-stalled system for the sharing out across the EU of asylum seekers who reach Europe outside of official border crossings.
I'm sure that in a few days we will also have the formal decision on the general proposal, on the crisis proposal, and that is very much welcome.
She put irregular arrivals this year at 250,000 people, mostly those who fled wars and poverty in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia, and reached the EU across the Mediterranean. For additional stories, 24 hours a day, visit our website, voanews.com. This is VOA News. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said on Thursday that the U.S. State Department has been conducting contingency planning in case of a government shutdown.
We continue to work through that planning in the coming days to make decisions about what functions are essential to national security that cannot be suspended even in the case of a shutdown, and what functions unfortunately do have to be suspended.
The House of Representative Republicans, led by a small faction of hardline conservatives, have rejected spending levels for fiscal year 2024 set in a deal that Speaker Kevin McCarthy negotiated with President Joe Biden in May. Republicans control the House by a 221 to 212 margin. A gunman killed 3 people in the Dutch city of Rotterdam on Thursday. Reuters correspondent Olivia Zolino reports.
Police said a gunman fatally shot a 39-year-old woman and her 14-year-old daughter in their home, then set the building on fire. The girl was taken to hospital, where she died from her injuries. Police spokesperson Fred Westerbeek said the suspect then made his way to Rotterdam Medical Center University Hospital. Once there, he entered a classroom and shot a 43-year-old male teacher, who also died from his injuries. A hospital employee was at work when the shooting took place.
We heard that there was a shooting. First, we all had to stay inside, and then suddenly, we all had to go outside. I was working with children, and we had to get them all out of the consulting rooms, and then we ran outside.
Westerbeek said he was apprehended with a firearm in his pocket and was wearing a bulletproof vest. He added that the suspect was a student who acted alone and called his actions targeted, but did not provide a motive.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday said relations between Russia and South Sudan were developing, quote, intensively. VOA's Kim Lewis has more.
Speaking at a meeting with the South Sudan President Salva Kiir in Moscow, Putin noted Russia was one of the first countries to recognize the sovereignty and independence of South Sudan. Kiir said he was happy for the warm welcome and stressed that he was in Moscow as an opening to work together in the future.
I'm happy for the warm welcome that has been given to us with my delegation.
The meeting took place as the Kremlin seeks more allies amid the military campaign in Ukraine. Kim Lewis, VOA News.
Israel has reopened the main crossing with the Gaza Strip, allowing thousands of Palestinian laborers to enter the country for the first time since it was sealed earlier this month. The crossing reopened on Thursday after weeks of violent protests along Gaza's frontier with Israel, where demonstrators have thrown explosives and rocks and launched incendiary balloons that sparked fires. The protests have driven up tensions, prompting Israel to launch airstrikes targeting military posts belonging to the militant group Hamas that rules Gaza. I'm Alexis Strope, VOA News. This is VOA News. I'm Alexis Strope. A bail bondsman charged alongside Donald Trump in Georgia has become the first defendant to take a plea deal. AP correspondent Norman Hall reports.
Bail bondsman Scott Graham Hall has accepted a plea deal with prosecutors handling the case of the former president and 17 others accused of election interference. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanors. As part of the deal, Hall will receive 5 years of probation and agreed to testify in further proceedings. He was also ordered to write a letter of apology to the citizens of Georgia and is forbidden from participating in polling activities. Prosecutors had accused him of participating in a breach of election equipment in rural Coffee County and initially charged him with racketeering and 6 conspiracy charges. I'm Norman Hall.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's last-ditch plan to keep the government temporarily open has collapsed. Friday's vote a day before the deadline makes a government shutdown almost certain. The vote was 198 to 232, with 21 hard-right Republicans voting to sink the package. The bill would have kept the government operations open through October 31st. The Senate is working on its own plan that is widely supported by both parties. The Senate plan to continue funding at current levels is headed for votes this weekend. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said in an interview with Reuters on Friday he was confident that Poland will find ways to address disagreements with Ukraine.
I'm just expecting and confident that Ukraine and Poland will find a way to address those issues without that impacting in a negative way the military support to Ukraine.
Poland said last week it would no longer agree to new arms deliveries to Ukraine, but instead focus on rebuilding its own stocks. Poland has been seen until recently as one of Ukraine's staunchest allies, but relations have soured after Poland's decision to extend a ban on Ukrainian grain imports. This is VOA News. Refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh continue to cross into Armenia by the thousands, with more than half the population of the enclave evacuated since Monday. VOA's Heather Murdoch reports from Goris, Armenia, on the road leading from Nagorno-Karabakh.
In mid-September, after decades of off-and-on wars, Azerbaijan swiftly gained control of the entirety of Nagorno-Karabakh, a self-declared republic that lies well within Azerbaijan's internationally recognized borders. Here in the border area, aid workers offer food, water, and some services as families enter Armenia.
But many families say the housing facilities here for refugees are full, and the patchwork of aid groups does not appear to be prepared to help the tens of thousands more people expected to arrive in the next few days.
Heather Murdoch, VOA News, Goris, Armenia.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered one of the top commanders of the Wagner military contractor to take charge of what he calls, quote, volunteer units fighting in Ukraine. AP correspondent Charles de la Desma reports.
The order signals the Kremlin's efforts to keep using the mercenaries after the death of their boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Putin has told Andrei Trosev that his task is to form volunteer units that could perform combat tasks, primarily in the war zone. The meeting appears to reflect the Kremlin's plan to redeploy some of the Wagner mercenaries to the front line in Ukraine, following their brief mutiny in June and their chief's suspicious death in a plane crash on August 23. I'm Charles de la Desma.
U.S. President Joe Biden will remain in Washington over the weekend, and the White House will remain in contact with congressional leaders as a government shutdown looms. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters on Friday.
The president's going to be in Washington, D.C. Our team here is going to continue to remain in touch with congressional leaders and the members of both parties. Certainly he's going to get updates.
The U.S. government was 2 days from a partial shutdown on Friday as hardline Republicans refused to support a bipartisan Senate proposal to keep the government open, and also voiced opposition to their own party's plan to give lawmakers more time to negotiate a full-year deal. Bad weather has eased in central Greece, leaving widespread flooding and infrastructure damage across the farming region that has been battered by 2 powerful storms in less than a month. On Friday, municipal workers were handing out bottled water in the storm-hit city of Volos, where power and water outages remained in some districts for a third day. Rescue crews used excavators to clear debris-strewn roads, blocking access to remote areas. Despite the improving weather, the risk of additional flooding remains high in several central cities, and towns as riverbanks are vulnerable to high water levels. I'm Alexis Strope, VOA News.